Have you ever wondered how far a nation would go to protect its honor and sovereignty during a war? This question brings us to an extraordinary chapter in the annals of military history, the birth of Kamikaze. This strategy, born in the crucible of World War II, was a testament to the lengths Japan was willing to go to turn the tide of war in its favor. In the face of mounting losses and dwindling resources, the Japanese military devised a strategy as daring as it was devastating: the kamikaze. This wasn't just a military tactic, it was a cultural phenomenon deeply rooted in the nation's history and ethos. The term kamikaze translates to divine wind, a reference steeped in legend. Back in the 13th century, the Mongols, an empire known for its military might, attempted to invade Japan. Against all odds, Japan was saved not by its military but by a typhoon. This storm, dubbed the Divine Wind, decimated the Mongol fleet and kept Japan safe from invasion. Fast forward to World War II, Japan found itself in a similar predicament. The once mighty nation was at the brink of defeat, and in desperation they invoked the Divine Wind once more. But this time it wasn't a natural phenomenon. Instead, it took the form of young, dedicated pilots willing to sacrifice their lives for their country. They would fly their explosives-laden planes directly into enemy ships, inflicting as much damage as possible. This was a strategy born out of desperation, yes, but it was also a reflection of the Japanese concept of Bushido, or the way of the warrior. This samurai code of honor emphasized loyalty, self-discipline, and respect for the enemy. The kamikaze pilots embodied this spirit, willingly giving their lives in service of their country. As the war progressed, this divine wind would take a human form, forever changing the course of history. But the story of Kamikaze doesn't end there. As we delve deeper, we'll discover how this strategy played out on the battlefield and the lasting legacy it left behind. But what exactly was the strategy behind these suicide missions? Let's delve into the intricacies. The kamikaze strategy was born out of desperation. Japan was losing ground in the Pacific, and they needed a game changer. They turned to a tactic that was as old as warfare itself: the suicide mission. But this time, it was different. These were not foot soldiers with a bomb strapped to their chests. These were pilots, flying into the heart of the enemy forces with their aircraft laden with explosives. The selection and training of kamikaze pilots were rigorous and meticulous. These were not just any pilots. They were the best and the brightest, handpicked for their skills and their unwavering loyalty. They underwent intensive training, not just in flying, but also in the art of dying. They were taught to view their mission as a form of duty, honor, and sacrifice, a way to serve their country and their emperor to the very end. The aircraft used in kamikaze missions were often obsolete or damaged, but they were still deadly. They were packed with high explosives and were piloted with precision and determination. The aim was not to shoot down enemy planes, but to crash into enemy ships, causing as much damage and chaos as possible. The targets were primarily the American naval fleet. The Japanese hoped that by sinking or severely damaging these ships, they could stem the tide of the American advance. They believed that the psychological impact would be just as significant, if not more so, than the physical damage. They hoped that the sight of these suicide missions, the knowledge of the lengths to which the Japanese were willing to go, would demoralize the enemy and break their will to fight. The kamikaze strategy was indeed a game of numbers, a desperate measure taken in desperate times. The Japanese knew they were outnumbered and outgunned. They hoped that the sheer audacity of their tactics, the shock and awe of their attacks, would tip the scales in their favor. They were willing to sacrifice everything, including their lives, for a chance at victory. The kamikaze strategy was indeed a game of numbers, a desperate measure taken in desperate times. Now, let's dive into the actual implementation of these missions during the war. The first deployment of kamikaze tactics was during the Battle of Leyte Gulf in October 1944. This marked a turning point in the Pacific War. The Japanese High Command, faced with the potential loss of the Philippines, made a desperate decision. They chose to employ a strategy that would not only cause significant damage to the enemy, but also inspire fear and uncertainty. In the midst of the battle, the Japanese launched their special attack units, These were not typical fighter planes, but rather flying bombs, piloted by young men who had willingly chosen to sacrifice their lives for their country. These kamikaze pilots aimed their aircraft directly at Allied ships, turning themselves into human-guided missiles. The impact of these initial kamikaze attacks was both immediate and devastating. They sunk or severely damaged several American vessels, causing shockwaves within the Allied forces. The sheer audacity of the attacks, coupled with the significant damage inflicted, made it clear that the Japanese were willing to go to extraordinary lengths in their defense. As the war progressed, kamikaze tactics were used in numerous battles and events. One of the most notable was during the invasion of Okinawa in April 1945. The Japanese launched more than 1,500 kamikaze attacks, resulting in the sinking or damaging of a large number of Allied ships. The scale of these attacks was unprecedented and demonstrated the lengths to which the Japanese were willing to go to defend their homeland. However, the impact of the kamikaze was not only physical. They also had a profound psychological effect on the Allied forces. The willingness of the Japanese to sacrifice their lives in such a manner was deeply unsettling. This was a new form of warfare, one that went beyond mere physical confrontation. It was a battle of wills, a test of resolve. The kamikaze attacks raised questions among the Allies about the feasibility of an invasion of Japan. If the Japanese were willing to sacrifice so many lives in the defense of Okinawa, what would they be willing to do to defend their homeland? This led to a shift in Allied strategy, with an increased focus on aerial bombardment and, ultimately, the decision to use atomic weapons. In the end, the kamikaze missions did not change the outcome of the war. The Allied forces were too strong and Japan's resources were too depleted. But they did leave a lasting impression. They served as a stark reminder of the lengths to which people will go when they believe their cause is just and their homeland is under threat. The kamikaze missions, while destructive and horrifying, were an undeniable factor in the course of World War II. So what is the legacy of these kamikaze missions? Indeed, the echoes of the kamikaze missions reverberate long after the last plane fell. In the immediate aftermath of World War II, the perception of the kamikaze was polarized. In Japan, the kamikaze pilots were hailed as national heroes, their sacrifice an embodiment of the Bushido spirit, the way of the warrior. They were seen as the ultimate patriots, willingly surrendering their lives for the love of their homeland. On the other hand, the rest of the world viewed these suicide missions with a mix of fear, awe, and revulsion. The kamikaze were seen as fanatics, their actions a testament to the lengths to which a regime could push its people. As time passed and wounds healed, the portrayal of kamikaze in popular culture began to shift. In films, novels, and art, the kamikaze were no longer just faceless adversaries, but human beings driven to desperate measures. They became symbols of the tragic cost of war, their stories a poignant reminder of the horrors that humanity must strive to avoid. The kamikaze missions also had a profound impact on military strategy. They underscored the power of asymmetrical warfare, demonstrating how a smaller force could inflict significant damage on a larger, more technologically advanced enemy. This lesson has been absorbed by military strategists around the world and has influenced the conduct of warfare to this day. But perhaps the most enduring legacy of the kamikaze missions is the debate they sparked about the morality of suicide missions. Are such tactics ever justified? Can the deliberate sacrifice of one's own life in the pursuit of a military objective be considered honourable? Or is it an act of desperation and disregard for the sanctity of life? These are questions that continue to be asked, not just in academic circles but in the hearts and minds of people everywhere. The kamikaze missions, a symbol of desperation, sacrifice, and national pride, have left an indelible mark on the annals of warfare. In conclusion, the kamikaze missions represent a unique chapter in the history of warfare. Born out of desperation and a deep sense of honour, the kamikaze strategy was a radical departure from traditional military tactics. With pilots volunteering to fly explosive-laden aircraft into enemy targets, these missions were a chilling demonstration of Japan's resolve during World War II. Their impact was significant, both in terms of physical damage and the psychological toll they took on the enemy. Despite the controversial and devastating nature of these attacks, they left an undeniably profound mark on the course of the war. Beyond the battlefield, the legacy of Kamikaze continues to resonate. It serves as a stark reminder of the lengths to which a nation would go in the face of adversity. A testament to the lengths a nation would go to protect its honor and sovereignty, the Kamikaze missions continue to evoke a mix of awe, horror, and respect.